According to City Attorney David O'Milia, the law right now says that you can only paint on a city street in reasons of safety, and that allowing the BLM mural to stay here in Greenwood would allow anyone to paint on any city street anywhere. Councilor McKee tells me that interpretation of the law could be painted over soon. Jerome says officers are trained to have their taser cross draw from their pistol. So an officer who is a right-handed shooter would keep their pistol on their right hip and their taser over on their left hip. That's to avoid accidentally grabbing the wrong one. One of those operations actually broke out their wallets and spent 7 to 8 times the going rate per acreage here in the county. He says they bought a 20-acre property for $700,000, which equates to $38,500 per acre, when the going rate here in Okmulgee County is just $5,000 per acre. Business owners operating by the book say it's hard enough to try to turn a profit in this market, and having to battle against the black market makes it near impossible. The predators online actually make his job pretty simple most of the time. They message who they believe is a 14-year-old girl, and he says they use what he calls a grooming tactic to ask them actually pretty standard questions like, where do you go to school, and do you have any brothers or sisters, before deciding it's time to steer the conversation in a much different direction. Officer Zerkishan is still recovering at a rehabilitation center, but when he's cleared to return home, he'll check his mail for the first time and find it inside of this brand new white brick custom mailbox that he's always wanted. We got a glimpse at body cam video of that 8-minute long police pursuit that led to an on-foot chase that all culminated in this area near 17th and Lenape. As you'll see in the video in just a few moments, 17-year-old Farrah Roush was actually laying right here in the grass, surrounded by police officers. And as you'll see, she turns and raises a gun and points it back at police. There are several crews around Mays County and beyond who are out here trying to get to both of those out-of-state contractors who are still stuck down inside of the dam. Now, a spokesperson with the GRDA tells us that around 6 o'clock this evening, 3 contractors were actually doing some routine core drilling down inside of the dam when there was an explosion. Now let's show you kind of what the electric voting machines are looking like. This row here, we have a few technicians who are working on our election voting machines. We have them unlocking the boxes here, and you can see they're taking the tags which indicate which precinct this box is from, and you can see how many tags we have on the floor here. That's just how many they've gone through at this point. City crews are almost going on day 4 of trying to repair a lot of water main breaks across the city, and a lot of them are larger ones. Saturday night, they had a couple come in at 21st in Cincinnati and 21st in Lewis, and this is another large one here at 31st in Rockford, just east of 31st in Peoria, where you can see the water sort of gushing down the hill into this valley here where it's really starting to settle in. Now, remdesivir did work in Mason's case, but research does show that it doesn't work for everyone, especially those who are in critical condition, like those who are on breathing ventilators. Mason tells me that he's just about over every symptom of COVID at this point. The only thing he still has trouble with is his sense of smell. From nothing 2 years ago to, oh, quite something now.
We will be a $1 billion market. We will have $70 million in tax money coming in.
Chip Paul is the executive director at OK4U Approved. The program works with medical marijuana patients to find safe and effective organic pharmaceutical alternatives. Paul and his wife grew OK4U after writing the bill to make it possible. Nearly 57% of Oklahoma voters approved State Question 788, legalizing marijuana for medicinal purposes in 2018. Thousands across the Sooner State lined up for licenses. 190,000 Oklahomans registered for medical cannabis in year 1. That number is now doubled.
Because honestly, the rate of applications really has not slowed down.
According to Marijuana Policy Project, the slice of Sooner State citizens licensed to buy and use medical marijuana is larger than in any other state. Nearly 8% of Oklahomans hold medical cannabis cards. The next largest portions are in Maine and California, with slightly less than 5%.
That's why our program has taken off. That's why it's flown. That's why it's flourished the way that it has.
The state is making a pretty penny off of medical marijuana sales. The Oklahoma sales tax is 4.5%, plus the 7% excise sales tax laid out in State Question 788. The revenue coming into the state is growing like the plant it's profiting off of.
The OMMA reports just over $240,000 in tax revenue in fourth quarter 2018. In 2019, the state reported almost $55 million. The cash crop continues its climb in 2020 tax totals nearing $128 million.
That money goes to the Department of Health, and they're supposed to use that money per budget to run their department.
Paul tells Two Works for You investigates he wrote that into law in the lens of a $100 million industry. The plant program is proving him wrong so far.
We will 10x that, right, in 2021.
The OMMA says about $25 million of that tax revenue funds the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority. The program's director, Dr. Kelly Williams, tells Two Works for You $30 million in excise tax money was spent on drug education in schools in 2020. An additional $10 million helps fund state drug rehabilitation centers. Paul says it's about time legislators got their hands on that abundance of bud money. But local dispensaries worry greed is growing from all this green.
Right now, it feels like everybody's got their hand in the cookie jar.
Taxes on the patient could soon turn on the provider. State partner track and trace program Metric is starting its system in Oklahoma this month. The company charges a 45-cent fee for tracking tags tied to each plant. Tony Rodriguez and his team at Harvest Health Dispensary in Sand Springs grow around 2,500 plants at a time.
This guy wanted to add a little bit of tax here, this guy wants to add a little bit of tax here, and when you start adding all these entities up, it falls all back to the grower or to the dispensary that has to inevitably pass it back to the consumer.
That's not all the money the state and its partners stand to make from medical cannabis. The state charges $100 for each patient license and $2,500 for every business license. The state is pocketing almost $63 million in total active license fees. An OMMA spokesperson tells me the license money goes to the Department of Health. I'm also told the legislature dipped into the fund last year almost as an emergency cash reserve during coronavirus and shifted it into the state's education spending.
We're going to be processing overnight and going without sleep and whatever it takes to get them counted.
What it takes for this 2020 general election is more than the Tulsa County Election Board ever imagined.
That's what we'll be doing hour after hour, day after day, meeting after meeting.
Coronavirus is concerning voters, passing on in-person voting at polling places on election day, instead opting to vote absentee.
This is the year for records.
Election board officials expect over 100,000 mail-in ballots by 7 o'clock on November 3rd. They tried filing through 18,000 at their first meeting on Friday.
We're just getting started.
That starting line looks different than any other decision year. Tulsa County Election Board Secretary Gwen Freeman and a representative from the Tulsa County Republican and Democratic parties make up the board. The trio called in reinforcements to help process ballots. The board and 9 others are tasked with verifying absentee affidavits.
Their primary job is to sift through these absentee ballots and obviously set aside the ones that are definite yeses.
A yes affidavit includes the voter's signature and valid voter ID or notarization.
All those things are in place and ready to rock. Then they set those aside to be processed.
If something is wrong, it's dropped in the bin to the right. Those maybes are presented to the 3-person panel. They individually vote to decide if the ballot is counted or rejected.
And we have a very strict way of verifying that the voters is who they say they are, and that's what makes people feel comfortable about it.
The pandemic putting a damper on polling places puts more pressure than ever on absentee approval. Election board members must scan quickly without making any mistakes.
We make sure that we renew that sense of urgency and that sense of, this is extremely important.